Yeah. So let's get into the details here, because a lot of our listeners may not realize the difference between airline schedules and a Part 91 private owner schedule. And you've given
Sure.
us a little bit of that in the past, but let's talk about this trip specifically. How did your trip start? Did you get a phone call saying, okay, I got something for you, or was it scheduled in advance?
So most of our stuff is scheduled in advance. And, in the private Part 91 world, there's a lot of variability in the different jobs in terms of what you were just talking about, scheduling, what kind of, and how that's all going to work. Some people in the more charter side, they can get phone calls last minute. We do not. We are fortunate. We're very fortunate. I will even put it that way, that almost all of our stuff is scheduled at least a week, and more typically 2 or even 3 weeks in advance. I had known that this trip was coming up, fine-tuning the details about exactly what time of day we were going to be leaving, and maybe a day or two shifted here or there. But I knew that this trip had been coming up, so we had geared up for it. I knew that it was coming. I found out about this particular trip at least a week and a half in advance of the day. However, I didn't find out exactly what time we were leaving until the day before. And actually, as an example of that, we had a plan. We were going to be flying from the LA area into the Eagle, Colorado airport. And then I think it was about 4:00 in the afternoon, the day before we left, it changed, and we added an intermediate stop in the Denver area. And that changed all kinds of stuff for us, because then we were going to actually leave the airplane in Eagle, and then we had to get ourselves back home. Well, now we weren't going to be able to make the flight, and that kind of turned into all kinds of a lot of logistical changes.
Yeah.
So we know that flight's coming up, but then some things, for business, for our client, business can sometimes change, and we obviously have to be able to accommodate that and change things on the fly. And so what we did was we went from LA, we flew to the Denver area where we stopped, and we were there for about an hour and a half, and then made the short flight over to Eagle. And then we caught a commercial airline flight back through Denver, and then on home to San Diego, and got home at about 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. So was the airplane starting out in San Diego? Is that where you kicked off?
Our airplane is based in the San Diego area, and so it basically always starts with a reposition leg from the San Diego area up to the LA area, where we will pick up passengers and then fly them to wherever they happen to be going.
Okay. So you start out, you fly out to the airport where the airplane is based, and you have to do the pre-flight, the flight planning, weather, checking the weather, and file a flight plan on that, or is it VFR?
No, we always go IFR.
Okay.
It's always the same thing. We file an IFR, and all that flight planning is done the day before. So everything's been, there's computer programs that will do that for you. Weather's been checked the day before. Flight plan's been checked to be filed automatically the day before. And so we show up, and like you were saying, we do the pre-flight. We've got a mechanic that's there. We push the airplane out of the hangar. We fuel in the San Diego area. And so basically by the time we get to LA, where we're going to do our pickup, we're pretty much ready to go. We'll do a couple last minute things. Typically we'll have the labs serviced, as close to boarding as possible. And we'll go from there. But most everything is taken care of before we actually even start the trip in the San Diego area.
Okay. So it's all, and it's someone does that all for you, or is that something you have to do?
Nope. That is all our responsibility. And that's one of those big differences between the airlines and the Part 91 corporate private world, is that there are no dispatch departments. There's no crew scheduling. We do all of that. We are responsible for all of that, as well as any catering, making sure that they have food or whatever drink in the back, and as well as cleaning the airplane. We are also responsible for cleaning the back of the airplane as well. So there's a little bit more work that goes into any given leg. In the corporate side, we arguably probably work a little bit less frequently, but every time we do have a trip, it does require a little bit more work, especially when you start getting into the international, because all of that still is going to come on that's our responsibility to take care of that as well. And that definitely adds some legwork, if you will.
A lot more paperwork filing in that scenario.
There is, because obviously you don't want to just be flying into foreign countries without knowing exactly what you're getting into.
Yeah. So, and then have any of the cleaning processes changed or from this COVID situation that you were doing before to now, or is it pretty much because it's a private jet that it's pretty much standard cleaning?
It's a pretty much standard cleaning. We do things a little bit differently. But in the end, when we clean the airplane, and then we'll clean the airplane after the trip, which then means that the airplane's going to sit for, days before it's going to be flown again. And we do, the big thing that has changed is we have definitely mitigated how much we are in the back of the aircraft as much as possible. But we don't really clean the airplane any different. It's the same people for the most part that are in the cabin. We don't have a constant, rotation of different people that are coming on, deplaning, and then we put on new people. We know who's going to be in the back of the airplane. That doesn't really change. We did have the airplane professionally detailed and sterilized and cleaned when we started flying more after this. But other than that, we clean pretty much the same way. We just try and keep ourselves out of the back as much as possible, much more now than we did before.
Yeah. So you took off out of the San Diego area, ended up going to, is it Los Angeles International? You go over there to
we go into Van Nuys.
Oh, in Van Nuys, yeah. So you go there, you pick up your owner, your client.
Correct.
And is that a pretty quick stopover, or there's no fueling involved, is there, or do you top off the tanks or do anything like that?
No, we're all pre-fueled. It's usually, for us, it's generally about an hour because we're going to try and get there in case something happens. We'll try and be there approximately an hour before he has told us that he's going to show up, and then we'll do the labs, and then we typically have plenty of time to then program the aircraft, just like you guys do at the airlines, program all of the avionics and the automation, and we have plenty of time to get that done. And then past that, a lot of it is actually just kind of waiting. Maybe we'll restock the ice, but other than that, it's a preventative. In order to not get there last minute, we usually have an hour, but it's a slow paced hour.
Yeah. Okay. So you went from LA and you went to a stop. Where was your intermediate?
We went to Rocky Mountain Airport. And
how was that going in there?
Well, that was your typical coming over the Rockies from the west. It was a little bit breezy over the mountains, and it was pretty bumpy coming down. Definitely a little bit exciting. Got rocked around a little bit. That was pretty uneventful. We did get a runway change, which was somewhat interesting. They switched runways about 4 times in the span of 2 hours because of changing winds. And so we got cleared for one approach and then got re-cleared for another. That wasn't too big of a deal. And so then we landed, and then we stayed with the airplane. We were there for about an hour and a half. So we left the APU running, the airplane powered up. It was in the mid 90s there that day.
Wow.
So it's pretty warm. So we kept the APU running, which allowed us to run the air conditioning. And that way we don't need to depower all the avionics, which requires reinitialization. We just kept it running. It was right about an hour and a half. And then he showed up right about on time, right when he told us when he had left. And then we blasted off and attempted to make the flight into Eagle. And that was really where things got not exciting, but they were definitely a little bit different than your standard 120-mile flight, which I think is about the distance from Denver into Eagle.
Oh, wow. Yeah, real short. Yeah.
Yep. Short flight. We were flying. Everything was fine. We climbed really well. We climbed over the mountains, and we were going along our flight plan route. And then, unfortunately, there was something that happened at the airport down in Eagle, and it was windy. As I recall, it was around 30 gusting at 39 knots or something like that at one.
Nice.
And so it was, I mean, it's definitely a little bit of a breezy day. And, I'm not really sure what was going on. I don't know whether this guy just was out trying to practice or whether he thought he was really, was ready for it. But there was a tailwheel airplane that ended up ground looping that effectively closed the single runway, excuse me,
Wow.
in Eagle. And it happened right after we had taken off. And so, normally I would guess that if the runway's closed and you're only going that amount of time, that they'd call the tower, hey, just hold them on the ground.
Right.
But we were already en route, and we were only about 40 miles from the airport, and we got the words that I had not heard in I don't even know how many years, and prepare to copy holding instructions.
What?
Which strikes fear in the hearts of every aviator out there because, well, we don't hold anymore.
Hold? Like pause?
Yes.
Like you pause the simulator?
Exactly. So we're going to hold the simulator for me.
Right.